Hello everyone, welcome to a new video. This time we'll be talking about the GHB Tempestrel tier list update. So, let's get started. I've already mentioned Athena a decent amount and how I consider Refinement to be fairly underwhelming. Well, let's get started on that one. So, our weapon is essentially just a Wadao. The Refine is Desperation. Now, Desperation is a really good skill if comboed into a Slaying Edge. The second it's comboed into a Wadao, you're locked into 3 choices unless you run something like Special Spiral. You can run Wrath, but it means you can maybe shut down 1 unit per turn, and that's if you even get to that point. It's overall not too great to run Wrath, unless you decide to just run it to cooldown anyway, and if you run it to cooldown, you typically may like the damage. Honestly, Athena is a clear... how can I put this? Athena is a clear character, a clear example of a character that has a good stat line and a good amount of potential, but completely misses it because the people who decided what to do for her Refine did not know what to do for her Refine. Now, Athena is by no means frail, but it seems that IS decided, yeah, she's frail, which is silly. She can easily take the hit-to-hit Brazen range, with or without Fury, and that's what it should have been for her. She should have gotten Brazen Attack Res or Brazen Attack Death as a Refine. Desperation is just extremely unwieldy, especially when attached to a Wadao. It's just, in a lot of ways, I do think you should just be running a stat increase over the Refine itself. But for the few sets that may work, this is what I would run, personally. This and another one. After all, like I said, hitting Brazen is easy for her. 35-28 is quite good. And with Brazen Attack Res, she basically pushed her bulk to 35-35. With buff, that's 41 Def and 41 Res. Again, Athena is everything but frail, but for some reason IS seems to think that she's so frail she needs Desperation to do well. And that's like if Ira got a Refine that gave her Desperation in her weapon and they kept the Flashing Blade effect. No one would be using that weapon. You know why? Because Ira has a even better bulk stat line than Athena. No one would use this! My Ira typically breaks both like 50 def and 40 res. With little to no support. Again, those units are not exactly frail. Athena is Ira before the Ira stat line was a thing. That's the best way to really describe her, so what they've done here is really silly. Anyway, the way you would want to use this with Flashing Blade 4 and Special Spiral is quite simple. You hit, you proc Ignis. Get 2 charge back from Special Spiral, rinse, and repeat. It's very simple, and honestly, there's just not a whole lot you can do that can integrate Desperation here. In a lot of cases, what you would do is refine it to defense, so you can, you know, take an attack boon instead. That's about all the extent of the weapon, or you just completely ditch the weapon. After all, what most people run is Flashing Blade 4, Gale 4, Slaying Edge. And, Wadao does not really give a whole lot to Athena. The other set is, well, it's really simple. It's basically the same thing, but with a different Brazen as the A slot, because that way she hits 48 def, 48 res, and with attack smoke upward to 55 def, 55 res. So, yeah. Again, not frail whatsoever. That's actually one of her biggest strengths. but they just kind of missed the point. Oh well. She doesn't really need to use Brazen Attack speed. As you can see, she hits 48 speed without me putting any point in speed, any flowers, anything. So you'd be kind of a fool to just decide to invest in that speed. Sure, on low merges, Brazen Attack speed might have some kind of purpose, but I'm gonna be completely honest here. Don't bother. Don't even go with speed plus, it's typically useless. You're going to get to a point where your speed is overkill and you're wasting points with that said speed. Put it in stats that will help you a lot more and a lot more consistently. So yeah. This is why I consider her to be overall B tier. She's not bad. Her base breath is alright. And I do want to stress the alright, because even the base breath is not really good. So honestly, in most cases I would just say just use a Slaying Edge. Just use a Slaying Edge, it's just better. It's just so much better. Because the thing with Athena is, as you can see with like this set here, is bulk a problem? No, it's not. Even if you don't have Brazen Death res up, you have 41 death and res. Which means you're at a point where you don't really care about desperation at all. You just want to invest in doing more damage. Running Wrath, running 2 cooldown like Bonfire because of Slaying Edge with Flashing Blade 4, so you hit. Or actually Ignis if you run Slaying Edge, because then you can just get hit, proc Ignis, Special Spiral or not. And you can just run Flashing Blade Seal with a Brazen as your A slot, and otherwise it's also fine. Again, Athena is not struggling with bulk, so Desperation does not really consistently help you. It literally just completely missed the point of what makes Athena a good unit overall as far as stats are concerned. But yeah, moving on to the second one. As per usual, I'm doing this from worst to best, so... Next up is Kana. Yep, Kana is that low on my list. For some reason, a lot of people are like, oh, she's so good, but all I can say is, in what way would you invest in Kana over a Drift Corin? Please tell me, because I have no goddamn clue. At the end of the day, Kana, I believe, has 2 more death, less speed, less attack, less HP, less res than in a Drift Corin. And a Drift Corin gets 5 attack and speed, multi-phase, not depending whether or not the enemy has a buff or not for when you initiate, but rather on the amount of unit around you. It's quite easy to work with, and it has cooldown -1, which is a rarity for dragons. Cooldown -1 just already there makes her better than Kana, let alone the fact she has better stats, she has a better prep, an easier condition to chain into a multi-phase, combos really well into Brazen. I think I've made my point. And even a Drift Corin is not a unit you would want to invest in. If you were to invest in her, you would be investing in Fallen Corin. I'm just pointing out the facts here, but yeah. The main problem Kana has is the fact that she's not a trainee unit. For some reason they decided to make both Kana not trainees, but then come up later with both Corins as trainees, despite the fact that the first time we've got either of them, as well as the second time we've got the female version, as well as the second time we've got the male version, they were not trainee. So they just pulled that out of their ass. But for some reason, the kids that should be trainees aren't trainees. You do you, IS, but that's just stupid. Anyway, enough of this. Let's talk about the weapon. The weapon is just a supped up water breath. It's as simple as this. If you get attacked, you get 4 across the board. And if the enemy doesn't have a buff up, you also get 4 across the board. So it can work on player phase and on enemy phase. Here's the problem though, they decided to give her LOL attack speed? Which is irrelevant. Speed is not a problem for her. Never has been, never will be. So I don't really understand why you want her to get speed in the LOL skills. Honestly, what they should have given her is LOL attack res instead, because there it would improve her damage all the time with melee units, and consistently with a few range units. On the other side, if it's not helping against ranged units, that's because you're typically hitting their def instead of their res. And if you are, then they typically don't have a whole lot of defense to begin with, so it's typically fine. So, kind of a missed opportunity there. That and the fact that 30 attack tends to be piss poor at best. Even if her weapon condition is active, even if, you know, she has her weapon up, even if, you know, she has buffs up, she has 56 attack in total. At plus 10, that's 60. Great. That's with a 20 might weapon. That's why I really wish LOL attack res was given to her, but oh well, here we are. Either way, I would definitely say that she is okay. It's just that the Refine doesn't really synergize too well with her weapon. Like I said, her attack is piss poor at best, so LOL attack res would have been better. The speed aspect is typically wasted, because she can easily break the 47 speed. Even on merge, in fact, you can basically hit with speed plus very easily the 47 speed. Just because you can have 10 dragon flowers, speed plus is a thing. And the fact that the weapon also gives 4 speed already, like speed plus 37, and then you end up with the Sunstone pushing that to 41. Then you have a buff pushing that to 47. Wow, really hard to get 47 speed with this unit. Sure need LOL attack speed, but the LOL attack part is at least good. She is fairly bulky, so she can definitely make use of this, and her stat line is not atrocious either. In other words, you can basically just use Brazen Attack Res, yet again, to fix up her attack to some extent, but also make her bulk quite good. Still, as far as sets goes, she's kind of one note. You can decide to do it like this, which is just pushing her bulk to 54 def, 54 res when attacked, or if the enemy doesn't have a buff. Which is alright. Ignis is also a good option because you get hit back, and then proc with Special Spiral. So damage becomes a non-issue at that point, but Special Spiral is also a very premium skill. And unless you really, really, really like Kana for some reason, it's typically not worth doing. It does fix her attack somewhat, pushing it to 70, and her speed right here, even at plus 10, is pushed to 47. Though, like I said, it's... well, actually, no, it's pushed to 51. 4 points too many. So, yeah, I suppose with low attack speed, you don't even need speed plus. Just attack plus and you're fine. But yeah, you're sitting on 70 attack, 51 speed. That's fairly good offensively. And bulk-wise, you can push yourself to 54 def and res, which, again, is not bad. With the low attack part, you push that up to 57 def and res, and, you know, the enemy cannot have an attack buff on top of it. The problem is that it's super reliant on Brazen. She can easily hit the Brazen range, but again, it's extremely reliant on Brazen range. It's solid though, which is more than I can say than for, say, Athena. I would say at least get the weapon. The Refine itself is... do it if you have a lot of dew to spare and you really like the character. If you don't like the character, it's probably not worth it. You just won't use him. or her rather, all that much. As for the second set, it's basically a distinct counter set, which means I have to use Bonfire instead. Because that way, if I have to deal with a range unit that's a bit more dangerous than the typical one because of blade tomes and such, you can just take a hit and proc Bonfire already. You could still run Ignis just like the other set, but I do think Bonfire is overall a bit better. You still end up with 47, 50 def and 50 res here, so it's not bad still. You also still push your bulk to 50 speed, or your offense rather, your offense to 50 speed, and your attack to 70, sorry. So it's not too bad. Moving on to Tsubaki, and Tsubaki is a weird one. I will say this pref don't look at my tier list my tier list is there to just see how good the refine is and if it's actually worth the due to spend on it. So how much it synergizes with it. Okay? If this was a tier list based on weapons alone, well, for one, Nephany would be S tier, not A+, and Tsubaki would probably be around those numbers as well. Because Golden Naginata is insane. The base effect is broken. It's basically what Selena got with her base weapon and Refine combined into one, but just better. Let alone with the Refine itself. It is overall very solid. The Refine itself is where I have issues. The plus 7 damage is good, don't get me wrong, but the fact that it's 70% or more HP means that you cannot run Brazens. Well, you can, it's just you have like a space of 5 HP to be between the Brazen and the weapon itself, which is extremely gimmicky, and I would never suggest you to do that. So because of that, the Refine itself can be a bit iffy. Brazens are really good on Tsubaki because his speed is already good. His attack is problematic, and Brazen synergizes really well with the Golden Naginata. In case you don't know, everything that has the clause at the start of combat is looking at your stats outside of combat, meaning Brazens and the plus 14 attack you get from them is not considered. So you can just basically have 45 attack, but in combat you actually have like 70, and it doesn't matter, it's still considered your attack at 45 versus whatever the enemy's attack is before the combat start, and then gives you 3 across the board if your attack is still lower. So yeah, it is a lot better than what people think. It's very similar to Cliff, where a lot of people have been sleeping on Cliff, but the fact of the matter is you can just combo Brazens into him and fix up his attack completely as a result. Now, as far as the Refine is concerned, there is really only one set I've done with it. This is a set that works on on mixed team comp. If you want something different, like a flyer team comp, just run flyer formations instead with own and fortify flyers. This team comp essentially pushes his attack and res by 7 each, which again is in combat buffs, so those are not considered in the stat check. Which is also why I decided to go with res plus over attack plus. So right here you're sitting at 58, 45, 45, 42. Def res bond pushes that further to 58, 45. Wait. Yeah, 58, 45, 50, 47. And then the Golden Naginata adds an extra 3 on top of it, which would be 61 attack, 48 speed, 53 defense, and 50 res. So yeah, it's honestly really good. 53 def, 50 res is really good to also upkeep the Golden Naginata's HP threshold. Another thing you can do if you don't really like aerobatics, it would be to run Mystic Boost to keep your HP high. It's another option to keep your HP consistently high, and one that should not go unnoticed. You could also use Noontime if you prefer that as an option, if you think your damage is already good enough that you don't need Ruptured Sky. Because of the Refine itself, you're basically looking at 68 attack as a result. But again, be careful, the second your HP drops too low, it's a bit iffy. So if you're going to use Tsubaki, ideally you'll have Brave Camilla or Halloween Mia to combo into him. Otherwise, he tends to fall a lot the second that he's under 70% HP. But yeah, otherwise this is fairly solid. Now, however, as I said, Brazen's R is Forte. This is a good example of this, because as a result, you're still hitting 61 attack, 48 speed, but you also have 48 def, 49 res. Very solid. Dual Range is here to deal with Blade Tomes, because Dual Range shuts down Blade Tomes entirely, meaning they lose all of their buffs' extra damage as a result, which makes him a lot more, tanky. Again, Mystic Boost is also an alternative, but this is not a set that well, Mystic Boost is not an alternative for this one. I'm stupid. But yeah, but still, Dual Range is really good at shutting down Blade Tomes to ensure that your HP remains high or that you don't get one-shot consistently. Irish Shield also is a good idea, but you'll typically you'll typically not have enough damage if you do go that way. The other set is basically more or less of the same, except this time it's a more physical set variation. So this is running a Def Refine instead of the Res Refine, so I can run double Brazen Attack Res, so I can hit 49-49. With the weapon, you hit 52 Def, 52 Res with 48 speed. And because of the double Brazen, you actually still hit 68 attack. You are overall more bulky as a result than the first set I showed. At least I think. No, actually, you're more or less the same, but you have the same attack, roughly, I think also the same speed, and on top of this, you don't care about positioning, rather. Because you're using Brazens. Brazens are a lot more free than Bond skills are. Still, Flyers are really good with Bonds if you use Aerobatics or Flyer Formation, so it's not as though it's unworkable, But yeah, still, this is overall a fairly good weapon. The Refine itself leaves a lot to be desired, but I'm gonna be honest, at that point, even if the Refine would have been like something extremely lame like Heavy Blade, I would not have given a shit. Because this weapon, the base effect is already good enough to be considered a Refine weapon. It's just that good. But yeah, moving on to what I consider to be the best Refine that we've got from this batch of heroes. Gordon. Now, this is a great example of a Refine that works with the base effect. In case you don't know, this is very similar to Tarja's X. Tarja's X is a bit better though, because it's based on a Blade Tome, and Tarja has actually a good stat line, unlike Gordon. Gordon's main issue really stems from the fact that his stat line is, well, no speed, his attack is low, and he has good def but no res. Still, it's extremely workable, especially when I'll show you the sets that you can run with this. But more importantly, the fact that he does attack def -4 essentially means he has a 13 might brave bow, okay? And it also pushes his bulk up by 4. But not only that, he becomes a fantastic support unit. In case you don't know, this is basically a reverse drive. It's a drive debuff. Any enemies that are within 2 space of Gordon are losing the stats. It does not need to be in a fight against Gordon. You can just put Gordon here and let an ally attack, and they'll get an extra 4 damage if they hit his defense, and they'll have more bulk because the enemy will also have lost 4 defense. This is amazing. This is the main thing why I say it's really good, and Brave Bow in itself is also fairly solid. It's literally everything Klein's Bow would want to be. Because Klein's Bow is just a chill skill, a literal seal at this point, whereas Gordon's skill is actually just completely unique. And this is extremely helpful. I almost wish he had this but for attack and speed, because that would be really good for speed sets. Not that it's impossible to work with his speed the way he is, but it's still worth mentioning. Still, this is a fantastic bow, and as far as builds are concerned, this is something you can do. Mirror Impact is really good at making your bulk work, still. Because you end up with 42 def and 37 res. This set can also really work with Mirror Strike whenever that becomes a seal, because then you'd end up with 42 def and 41 res. And because of the bow, 46 def and 45 res, making you extremely bulky as a result. Which is why I run Brash Desperation with this, because you get to a point where you're so bulky you can actually safely set up Brash Desperation. And the second you're in Brash Desperation, this unit just changes. And this is one of the reasons I say he's extremely good. Right here, he already ends up with 63 attack, okay? But 63 attack that always quad because of Brash Desperation the second the enemy can hit back. This is quite good. The only thing that can really screw this over is no follow-up, Wary Fighter, and so on and so forth. But even Wary Fighter won't really tend to stop you too much, because Gordon is in this awkward amount of speed where he has enough speed to go through Wary Fighter from the interaction of Brash Assault versus Wary Fighter in a lot of cases. You can quad characters such as Surtur, for example, because of this. Another thing is that you can combo him with Infantry Rush at that point, and even if the enemy has something like Steady Stance 4, you'll typically still be quite able to proc. I mean to proc Luna, if you couldn't tell. This is really good in general for this unit, but also it just gives him a whole lot of option overall. Death Smoke is also really good to increase his damage output, though typically you should have someone with Death Ploy on the team. It's overall better. So not only is he fairly bulky, but he can actually take hits when needed. Hell, if you don't want to reuse Brash Assault, you can also up to use a Brazen. Like say Brazen Attack Res, to make up for the res deficit you have. And so you'd be sitting with 7 more attack, which means 70 attack on a Brave Bow. This is a 3 to 4 star unit that can hit 70 attack with a Brave Bow. Let that sink in. Hell, you could also decide to go Brazen Attack Speed, and then you're at 37 speed. If you can get something like Brave Lucina with double drive speed, well, you're sitting at 46 speed with this set. Naturally doubling as a result, meaning you don't even need a Brash Desperation set anymore. Or you can just run Marth with double drive speed, and then run lull speed def on him, improving his damage further up to 73 attack, and shutting down any def buff the enemy might want to run. Again, this is a 3 to 4 star unit. I do think I should actually make him go up a tier right now, to be completely honest, but I'll have to mull it over time. Honestly, though, he hits like a truck. That much is certain, and he can actually hit good amount of speed with a bit of support, which again is really good. So, you know. As for the second set, this is just a more speed-based set. Though, like I said, the other set can become a speed set with Brazen Attack Speed. This is not good enough for a Brazen Attack Speed set, however, because the main issue you run into is the fact that you don't take hits. If you do take hits, you might get doubled at 41 speed. Still, if you do feel like trying something out, it is possible to use this with Brazen Attack Speed still. Just know that without Swiss Sparrow 3 at plus 10, it typically will end in your own death instead. Otherwise though, this should be really good. Not to mention, even if you don't quad, you just hit proc because of Special Spiral. So, again, quite solid. But yeah. All that to say, Gordon hits like a truck, can quad fairly easily, and not to mention, is a fantastic support unit on top of it all. Gordon's got it all, to put it simply. In conclusion, I do think all 4 of these units really got a decent boost outside of Athena. Kana's Refine and Tsubaki's Refine are not quite good, but their base weapons are actually very solid, if not a bit gimmicky in Kana's side. Still, you can definitely use her quite well. Now, it's just the issue is, in a lot of cases, you should not invest in her, but rather Adrift Korin if you decide to invest in one or the other. Because Adrift Korin just has a better stat line, scores better in Arena, has access to a better pref, and so on and so forth. But, other than this was a good batch of heroes. Hopefully one day Finn gets a refine or Leaf gets a refine, because I'd like to see my boys actually get the treatment they deserve. But hey, only time will tell. Have a good day everyone. Hopefully this was informative. See ya!